Imagine soaring through the skies, surrounded by clouds. Now, picture two airplanes, intersecting paths at high speed. This is the story of Flight 2937 and Flight 611. On July 1, 2002, a tragic mid-air collision changed everything. Flight 2937 was a Bashkirian Airlines Tupolev Tu-154. Flight 611 was a DHL Airbus A300. When Flight 2937 climbed higher, it shared the airspace with Flight 611. Both planes were unaware of each other's presence. Understanding this scenario helps us grasp the risks of air travel. Let's break down what happened that fateful day. First, radar issues caused confusion. The air traffic controller couldn't track both flights effectively. Next, a communication error between the flights added to the chaos. Flight 2937 received a conflicting traffic instruction. This led to a critical misunderstanding. Now, let's talk about the altitude situation. Flight 2937 was instructed to climb, not aware of the DHL flight below. Meanwhile, Flight 611 descended, aiming to avoid weather. They unknowingly approached each other at the intersection point. With little warning, a catastrophic collision occurred. Both aircraft were drastically damaged in seconds. The passengers and crew aboard experienced pure terror. It is essential to understand the aftermath of this incident. Investigators worked tirelessly to uncover the reasons. The focus was on improving air traffic control measures. Now, let's look at a comparative example. Think of this as two cars on a busy highway, switching lanes. If both drivers misjudge speed and distance, a crash can happen. In summary, the collision of Flight 2937 and Flight 611 highlights air travel challenges. Improved communication and traffic management are essential for safety. This tragedy led to major changes in aviation regulations. It serves as a reminder of the importance of awareness in the skies. Want to learn more about aviation safety? Subscribe to our channel for in-depth stories and analysis. More fascinating aviation topics are just a click away. As the sun sank lower in the sky, the air above the clouds began to grow heavy with tension. On board Flight 2937, the cabin was filled with the sounds of quiet conversations and the hum of the aircraft. Meanwhile, in the cockpit, the crew felt a sense of urgency as they followed the instructions relayed to them. The air traffic controller's voice crackled through the radio, barely understood amidst the confusion. Resolute, they believed they were safely clearing the airspace. It was a moment teetering on the edge, unaware of the chaos unfolding just below them. Suddenly, without further warning, a loud, jarring crash reverberated through the aircraft, shaking the very foundations of the passengers' reality. Inside the cabin of Flight 2937, the joyful chatter turned to screams as everyone struggled to comprehend the terrifying situation. A rush of fear surged through the crew as alarms blared, indicating a catastrophic failure. Their training kicked in, but the gravity of the moment was unlike anything they had prepared for. In a split second, the serene flight turned into a battle for survival, as passengers clutched their armrests, faces twisted in disbelief. Time seemed to stand still, suspended in sheer horror. Amidst the turmoil, the pilot of Flight 2937 fought to regain control while desperately assessing the damage. The previously calm atmosphere transformed into one of frantic urgency, each crew member springing into action, signaling to prepare for emergency procedures. The words spoken were now focused and sharp: "Prepare for emergency landing." The reality of their predicament cut through the confusion like a knife. Passengers, still in shock, looked to the crew for assurance. Trust and hope echoed in their wide eyes, even as fear loomed in the cabin. Outside, the world continued its indifferent march, unaware of the calamity unfolding within the metal bird racing through the sky. Desperation and determination mingled in the air as they fought against the odds, each second stretching like an eternity. In the cockpit of Flight 611, the crew had also unwittingly entered a state of crisis. As alarms began to echo around them, they scrambled to understand the magnitude of what had just occurred. What just happened? One pilot shouted, straining to focus through the chaos. The co-pilot quickly scanned the instruments, searching for clarity amid the blaring warnings and flashing lights. Outside, the once clear skies were now marred by the remnants of the collision, a haunting reminder of the peril that lurked unseen. The ground crew watched in horror, their routine day shattered by a disaster that would echo in aviation history. In the end, the tragic collision of Flights 2937 and 611 serves as a stark reminder of the critical importance of communication, awareness, and rigorous safety measures in the aviation industry, urging us to honor the lives lost by continually striving for greater safety in the skies. Amidst the chaos, each second felt like an hour as the pilots of Flight 2937 struggled to stabilize the aircraft. The cabin erupted into a cacophony of terrified cries, drowning out the thudding of hearts racing in unison with panicked breaths. "Brace for impact," shouted the pilot, each word pressing against the reality that they might not make it. Passengers scrambled for whatever support they could find, gripping seat belts as if their lives depended on it, a hope against hope. In this moment of impending doom, every soul aboard was united in a fear that transcended language and nationality. They were all simply human, yearning for survival. As the crew of Flight 2937 braced for the inevitable, the co-pilot's hands moved deftly over the control panel, troubleshooting warnings while the plane lurched violently. Outside, a plume of smoke began to trail behind them, a grim testament to the collision's devastating impact. Yet amidst the turmoil, instinct kicked in, and the pilot issued commands with a steady resolve: "We need to find a way down, maintain altitude for as long as possible." Desperation painted their faces, as they fought to redirect the plane's descent without losing further control. Meanwhile, on Flight 611, the atmosphere was equally charged. Crew members were engaged in a frantic assessment, trying to discern the extent of the damage and the best course of action. The urgency of the moment was palpable, a shared recognition that time had become both their enemy and ally. As navigational systems flickered, pilots encapsulated in their own crisis were acutely aware, every choice made now would alter the fate of those aboard. The tension in the cockpit of Flight 611 escalated as the crew worked against the clock, their voices rising above the blaring alarms. "We need to stabilize," the captain exclaimed, desperately trying to maintain control. They executed emergency protocols, straining to keep the aircraft aloft amidst turmoil. Outside, darkening clouds loomed ominously, as if mirroring the encroaching sense of dread inside the cabin. With coordinates flashing wildly across the screens, the co-pilot focused intently, reciting vital stats: altitude dropping, speed increasing. Panic threatened to take hold, but a steely determination replaced fear. Every instinct told them that they had to act quickly. They were not just fighting for themselves but for every person aboard. As if time had warped into slow motion, they prepared for a maneuver to avoid disaster, weighing each decision carefully as the world around them felt stifled by an imminent ending. At that moment, they were acutely aware that the fate of all souls on both aircraft hinged on their next move. With tension mounting, the pilots of both flights raced against time as they fought to regain control of their damaged aircraft. Each second that ticked by felt increasingly heavy, swelling with anxiety and desperation as they executed emergency maneuvers. The pilots exchanged quick, urgent glances, gauging the terrifying reality. They were not alone in this horrific struggle. The chaos of the situation seeped into their minds, a frightening crescendo of alarms and the hum of engines striving for stabilization. As their planes plummeted toward uncertain fates, the gravity of their choices weighed heavily upon their shoulders. Flight 2937's pilot made the critical decision to initiate a glide, banking sharply to the left in hopes of avoiding a further calamity. Meanwhile, on Flight 611, the crew employed every ounce of training and instinct in their arsenal, attempting to navigate their way through the treacherous airspace. They clung to the slim hope that a safe landing might still be possible, rallying their determination to push through the chaos. As both aircraft continued their descent, the air was thick with fear, yet also an unyielding spirit to survive that connected every individual on board. The flight crews were now acutely aware of the struggle against gravity, a dance with fate as the ground rushed closer. On Flight 2937, the pilot shouted commands, his voice steadying amidst despair, "Prepare for a crash landing, follow my instructions." With recalibrated focus, the crew rallied, relaying essential information while maneuvering the aircraft with utmost caution. The desperate pleas and shouts of passengers filled the cabin, pairing with the horrifying realization that their lives rested in the hands of these dedicated individuals. "Keep your heads down," the co-pilot urged, attempting to infuse some calm as they braced for impact, hearts racing with uncertainty. Each passenger held on to fleeting memories, breaths quickening as the reality of the imminent crash loomed over them like an unshakable weight. In those final moments, the courage of each person emerged, united in a poignant fight for survival against the devastation closing in around them. The co-pilot's hands shook slightly as he checked their altitude one last time, trying to summon a final spark of hope. "Flight 2937, we're going to make it," he declared, though uncertainty resonated in his voice. "Trust the instruments." The cockpit was a mess of blinking lights and urgent voices, underscoring the gravity of their situation. Meanwhile, the cabin's atmosphere shifted from sheer chaos to a grim determination. Passengers locked eyes with each other, forming an unspoken bond in the face of death. Outside, the landscape rushed toward them, an unavoidable force of nature poised to meet their frail aircraft. Amidst the turmoil, the pilot fought to retain a sense of clarity, calculating their final approach with unwavering resolve. "We can do this, just stay with me," he urged, channeling every ounce of strength into his command. The urgency around them reached a fever pitch, every second stretching infinitely as the ground loomed closer, whispering promises of finality they were desperate to resist. It was a moment dripping with tension, echoing the fragility of existence, with lives hanging in the balance between life and the looming abyss below. With a fierce grip on the controls, the pilot shouted over the commotion, "Prepare for descent, we must initiate emergency protocols now." The urgency in his command resonated through the cabin, where fear mingled with a flicker of hope. The crew moved swiftly, ensuring that every passenger heard and understood the dire instructions. Outside, the sun painted the horizon in hues of orange and pink, a stark contrast to the impending darkness of their situation. Everyone on board shared a collective resolve, each heartbeat served as a reminder of their shared fight for survival. Hope intertwined with dread, creating an atmosphere thick with anticipation. As the aircraft hurtled toward the ground, a shared determination illuminated the faces of all on board. Flight 2937 and Flight 611 had become symbols of resilience, each individual embodying the spirit of survival amid chaos. Though the tragic events would forever be etched in their memories, the resolve shown in those final moments would urge future generations to prioritize safety and community.